The EU's Foreign Affairs Chief Josep Borrell says Russia is committing a war crime by blocking food exports from Ukraine's Black Sea ports. With the bloc's foreign affairs ministers gathering in Luxembourg, Borrell appealed to Moscow to lift the blockade or risk exasperating the global food crisis. Borrell said there's a risk of famine in the world, especially in Africa, as a consequence of an increase in food prices coupled with an ongoing energy supply shortfall. He also defended EU sanctions against Russia, saying they were not to blame for the food emergency. Well, let's cross over to Brussels and speak to Maeve McMahon, who's been following the story. Maeve, good to see you there. So this morning, Borrell called the Russian blockade of Ukrainian exports a war crime. What more have foreign ministers had to say?
Good evening, Mariam. Well, Josep Borrell, the EU's Foreign Affairs Chief, not mincing his words there, calling a spade, saying that the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, was accountable for what he called this raw war crime for blocking 20 million tonnes of grain and not giving access to people who are waiting for that food, who are reliant on that food coming from Ukraine across the globe. He said that Vladimir Putin was ultimately responsible and very much accountable, that you couldn't use the hunger of people as a weapon. But what he also used his press conference to do was to make sure that the message wasn't out there that the EU and the European sanctions were to blame for this global food crisis and insecurity. Because, of course, we heard from African leaders that he's been conversing with that it is, in fact, those European sanctions that are to blame. But he today said that was not the case. He'd be sending, quote, comfort letters to African nations and to economic leaders in order to make sure it was crystal clear that it wasn't these sanctions. You can see Josep Borrell between a rock and a hard place, really, because on the one hand, he has ministers as well inside that room in Luxembourg today, especially the Polish minister, calling on the EU to go a step further, in fact, to go on for a seventh package of sanctions. But on the other hand, he's being blamed for the global food insecurity and also the cost of living crisis. If you look at here in Belgium today, thousands of people taking to the streets, blaming those sanctions and blaming inflation for the fact that they just can't afford to go shopping even anymore and they've no money left in their pockets.
And Maeve, it's also an important week for Ukraine and their European ambitions. Are there any signs in Luxembourg that Ukraine is ebbing closer to securing this EU candidate status at this week's EU summit?
Well, that was a huge topic of conversation today in Luxembourg because, of course, EU heads of state and government will be meeting here in Brussels on Thursday and Friday to discuss that very opinion that came out of the European Commission last Friday. A recommendation from Ursula von der Leyen and her Commission to support Ukraine and Moldova, but not yet Georgia, to be candidates for EU membership. And we heard lots of welcoming words today from ministers saying that this would be very symbolic and it would give a morale boost to Ukrainians who've been dying with the EU flag in their hand. And Josep Borrell, the EU Foreign Affairs Minister, was also very supportive of the move. Take a listen now to what he had to say.
That the European Council later this week should send a signal that we start the preparation for the European integration of these three countries. This is a powerful signal. It should be heard not only in Ukraine, not only in Moldova and Georgia, as a manifestation of our strength and unity and support to these three countries, and most especially to the one who is being aggressed by Russia.
But whatever happens at that EU summit, Ukraine's membership talks will not start overnight. It will still be a long road ahead. There'll be still hurdles to jump for Ukraine and Moldova and, of course, Georgia. All EU member states will then have to ratify the kicking off even of the negotiations, and then the tough talks will begin and an accession treaty will have to be drafted. But if you look at the Ukrainians, they say they have 70% of the work already done and they're ready to tick all the long list on all the boxes they have to do in order to get what they need to do in order to get that membership of the European Union, something they really want.